I am rereading this book, How to Finish the Christian Life, following Jesus in the second half, and there is much to learn from it. I highly recommend this, written by father and son, Donald W. Sweeting and George Sweeting. And I'm sure that was a great collaboration within the family. Get this book. I'm now going to read 1 Kings 21. 1 Kings and chapter 21. Sometime later, there was an incident involving a vineyard belonging to Naboth the Jezreelite. The vineyard was in Jezreel, close to the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. Ahab said to Naboth, "Let me have your vineyard to use for a vegetable garden, since it is close to my palace. In exchange, I will give you a better vineyard, or if you prefer, I will pay you whatever it is worth." Now that seems a reasonable offer, doesn't it? However, this will expose what Ahab really was, a greedy and spiteful man. It goes on to say, "But Naboth replied, 'The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers.'" So Naboth valued it so high it was priceless. It was his family inheritance, and he wasn't going to sell his family inheritance, not even to the king. Do we have things that we treasure as our inheritance? How easily would we give them up? No price that Ahab offered was going to buy Naboth's family inheritance. So Ahab went home sullen and angry because Naboth the Jezreelite had said, "I will not give you the inheritance of my fathers." He lay in his bed sulking and refused to eat. So it wasn't just a tiff, it was a deep sulk, and he wouldn't eat. That's the sort of character he was. If he'd been a man of integrity, he would have said, "Well, that's okay then, forget it. I made you an offer, you refused, so it's okay. And besides, I don't really need it. After all, I've got plenty of vineyards, I've got all my riches. Why should I want to have your family inheritance?" But that wasn't good enough for him. No, he wanted it, and so he sulked. His wife Jezebel came in and asked him, "Why are you so sullen? Why won't you eat?" I'm guessing that probably the servants had said to her, "Your husband is sulking and he won't eat." It wasn't just a casual question. He answered her, "Because I said to Naboth the Jezreelite, 'Sell me your vineyard, or if you prefer, I will give you another vineyard in its place.' But he said, 'I will not give you my vineyard.'" And she didn't talk some sense into him and say, "Look, stop sulking. Let the man have his vineyard, you've got plenty." No, she was even worse than Ahab. She was even more hard-hearted, because at least all he did was sulk. He didn't come up with a plot like she did. Jezebel, his wife, said, "Is this how you act as king over Israel? Get up and eat. Cheer up. I'll get you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite." She was a devious woman and hatched a plot and put her husband's name on it. she was using his kingly authority to do what she was about to do. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, placed his seal on them, and sent them to the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city with him. In those letters she wrote, "Proclaim a day of fasting and seat Naboth in a prominent place among the people. But seat 2 scoundrels opposite him and have him testify that he has cursed both God and the king, then take him out and stone him to death." So this is an order, effectively, from the king, even though it's written by Jezebel. And now it's gone from the king just sulking to talking to her to getting other officials involved in a plot to murder. The plot thickens. What started out as the greed of one man is encompassing other people and getting them to participate in a wicked act. So the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city did as Jezebel directed in the letters she had written to them. They proclaimed a fast and seated Naboth in a prominent place among the people so he could be seen, and it would draw attention to the confrontation that was about to take place. And poor Naboth wouldn't have known what was happening because he was innocent. Then the 2 scoundrels came and sat opposite him and brought charges against Naboth before the people, saying, "Naboth has cursed both God and the king." He had done no such thing. I'm not sure what he thought about the real God, but he certainly not brought anything against God, nor had he said anything against the king. All he had done was refuse to sell the king his vineyard. So they took him outside the city and stoned him to death. Evidently it wasn't a jury trial, it was a kangaroo trial. Guilt was already proclaimed upon him because Jezebel says so. Then they sent word to Jezebel, "Naboth has been stoned and is dead," knowing full well that's what she wanted. "We've carried out orders, Your Majesty. The man is dead, as you instructed." As soon as Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned to death, she said to Ahab, "Get up and take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite that he refused to sell you. He is no longer alive, but dead." When Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, he got up and went down to take possession of Naboth's vineyard. Now he wasn't horrified at what his wife had done. In fact, there's an implication that he was rather pleased. The man is dead, I can take over the vineyard. That's how hard the 2 of them were. Black, hard hearts. And we always have to examine our own hearts to make sure that we are not becoming hard-hearted. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, "Go down to meet Ahab, king of Israel, who rules in Samaria. He is now in Naboth's vineyard. When he has gone to take possession of it, say to him, 'This is what the Lord says. Have you not murdered a man and seized his property?' Then say to him, 'This is what the Lord says. In the place where dogs lick up Naboth's blood, dogs will lick up your blood. Yes, yours.'" Ahab said to Elijah, "So you have found me, my enemy." So a death sentence has been proclaimed upon Ahab, and that dogs that would have run wild in the streets would lick his blood. I have found you, he answered, because you have sold yourself to do evil in the eyes of the Lord. I am going to bring disaster on you. I will consume your descendants and cut off from Ahab every last male in Israel, slave or free. I will make your house like that of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and that of Baasha, son of Ahijah, because you have provoked me to anger and have caused Israel to sin. See, notice that. You have caused Israel to sin. You and your wife got other people involved in this murder. You have caused Israel to sin. And it all started with you. You misused your position of trust, and shown your greed. And also concerning Jezebel, the Lord says, dogs will devour Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. Dogs will eat those belonging to Ahab who die in the city, and the birds of the air will feed on those who die in the country. There was never a man like Ahab who sold himself to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, urged on by Jezebel his wife. He behaved in the vilest manner by going after idols like the Amorites, and the Lord drove out before Israel. Now that is a powerful word. There was never a man like Ahab, and it's like saying there was never another man as wicked as Ahab. I contrast that with what God said about Moses. Moses was the most humble man in all the earth. God searches hearts and knows what's really there. He searched Moses' heart and found that Moses was the most humble man in all the earth. That wasn't just people's opinion, that's what God had to say. And here is effectively saying the most hard-hearted man in the country is the king, Ahab. Hard-hearted enough to have got married to Jezebel, and she's got a black heart as well. And she has plotted this. And I'm telling you, I'm bringing disaster. I'm going to cut off your family from all of Israel. Not one of your descendants will make it. Not one of your descendants will sit upon the throne. Both slave and free are going to be put to death. And the whole nation will know about your deaths, and you'll all be shamed. When Ahab heard these words, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and fasted. He lay in sackcloth and went around meekly. I must admit, when I read this for the first time, I thought, is this just a performance? Sackcloth is this true? But the next verse answers that question. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite. Have you noticed how Ahab has humbled himself before me? Because he has humbled himself, I will not bring this disaster in his day, but I will bring it on his house in the days of his son. So God's punishment was still going to come. It just wasn't going to come in the lifetime of Ahab. So he got some degree of forgiveness. But we read in later chapters about how his whole family was cut off. He didn't die in the fashion that God had said he would, because God changed his mind about that. There's an area of intrigue about there. If God knows everything, and God knows what's going to happen, why did God relent from what he said was going to happen to Ahab? Because he didn't die with his blood licked up by dogs. He died with an arrow stuck in him in battle. So there is a mystery there. I can't answer it. But we know that God knows everything. But sometimes God seems to change his mind. My own opinion is God sometimes tells people, you have sinned and this is what I'm going to do to you. But when he sees a repentant heart, then God is pleased and relents from what he was going to do. We see that in people, places like Nineveh, where they repented and God didn't carry out the disaster. And Jonah, well, he had proclaimed the word, but he wasn't very pleased because he wanted God to carry out the disaster. But he knew God was going to change his mind. As I say, there's a mystery there, and perhaps you might want to discuss that. God doesn't tell us everything. He tells us what we need to know, and not necessarily what we want to know. So, this was in fact carried out in the days of Ahab's son, when the military commanders took their family and put them to death and their slaves, and they were indeed cut off as God promised. Just because God relents doesn't mean you're off the hook. God has to be seen to be just and holy and not a pushover. As I've said on a number of occasions, God is not a genie who grants our wishes. God is in charge. We have to obey him. This has been Peniel, and I'll leave you with those thoughts.